Hello, everybody. My name is Kenny. I am the founder and CEO of STR Insights, and I am super excited today. I feel like I say that every time, but I am excited today to bring on an actual data scientist to help discuss certain data points and metrics to help you determine which markets that you should invest in based on data. So we may talk about some specific markets, but the what we really want to highlight are the themes and the certain characteristics of successful markets and what the data says behind them. We're also going to be talking about destination types. So when I say destination type, keep in mind we're going to be talking about beach markets and mountain and river, lake, and urban, and classifying those markets as such. But keep in mind that when it comes to individual markets, they perform at different levels, and don't just take what we say as, oh, we need to just go invest in any old beach market, because that's not necessarily true. We're going to categorize them like that and talk on a high level and then dive down and give a few examples. So we have a special guest. Her name is Caroline Tomasik, and she is a data scientist, and she has helped STR Insights. She does some consulting for us, and she has helped us kind of aggregate some of the data to really dive in with some of the trends of the different destination types that we're going to talk about. So without further ado, I'm going to bring her in. And guys, if you have questions, I'm going to flip you around, Caroline. So we're like that. There we go, and blow it up. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the comments, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. And just put them in the comments. We'll try to answer them as we go, or we'll answer them toward the end, but we'll most likely be able to get to them. So anyway, Caroline, welcome to, I don't know, people keep calling this a podcast, and it's not. I just was like, hey, let's do interviews with random people each week, but welcome to this call or whatever.
Yeah, thank you. And you got my last name like half right. So,
that's okay. Tell everybody what's the correct way to pronounce it. It's Polish. So we'll start there. It's Polish.
Yeah. And as far as Polish last names go, it's honestly one of the easier ones, but still difficult. It's Tomasik.
Tomasik. Okay, Tomasik. All right. So everybody memorize that and store that in for next time. So Tomasik, Caroline Tomasik. All right, Caroline. So let's talk data. First off, let's talk about you. So I literally just said you're a data scientist, and you that means you're smart, right? Maybe.
Same thing, right?
Let's talk about some of the stuff that you've done in the past before, so that people can really understand like why you're qualified to kind of talk to us about short-term rental data. So tell us about some of the projects or things you've worked on in the past, unrelated to this specific one we're going to dive into today.
Right. So I work full-time at a consulting company, but a real big thing I did for like the Airbnb space was I wrote about 50+ page master's thesis all about it. So I was using AI, fancy, ooh la la, and machine learning and all of that to predict prices in the Los Angeles County market. And then I took the best performing algorithm and I dove into that. I used what's called a SHAP analysis. So that looks at which features contributed the most to the nightly rate.
Okay. So when you said prices, is that nightly rate? So
I was looking at nightly
average daily rate. Okay. All right. Gotcha. Mm-hmm. So you were doing, all right, I guess dumb it down for us a little bit. So you were looking at prices and you were seeing what impacted prices, or what exactly were you doing?
Yes. So I looked at the impact, like what it's called features in a like scientific term, but really it's just everything about an Airbnb listing. So if you go to any Airbnb listing, you're going to see how long it's been up, the star rating, the whatever else there is, bedroom count, all of that. So I'm taking all of that and then looking at what impacts the nightly rate the most.
Gotcha.
Like ranking them all. Yeah.
All right. And so what impact the nightly rate?
Yeah. So the number one thing, maybe unsurprisingly, was the number of guests that you can accommodate for. So
more heads and beds
increases, so did the nightly rate.
Interesting. Okay. So how did you take into account, and I guess we haven't really talked about this already, but I just out of curiosity, it came to mind. How did you take into account like pictures, design, decor, and like some of those things that you can't capture necessarily in the data?
Yeah, ooh, I love it. On a live, throwing an unprepared question. Let's go, Kenny. Okay.
I warned you.
So I did not, and this will be a little bit of a plug for STR Insights, but before STR Insights, I was just using open source data and it was pretty poor quality,
Mm,
honestly. I could not take design into account. So I will say my best performing model was like 72% accuracy, let's say. And
that's
basically I'm
that's not bad though. That's really
not
not bad.
bad, but I'm
For people
assuming that
listening, like
remaining,
I know what you're talking about with your accuracy. I'm assuming it was like your R squared value. Is that it?
yes,
Or
it was like
yeah,
the explained how much my model can explain in the nightly rate. So
yeah.
there's like 30% that's unexplained. And I'm guessing that has a lot to do with the design and the pictures and the text reviews. So those two components I didn't take into account. And of course,
Title, description, ranking, all these things that can impact revenue,
mhm,
that really can't be explained in the data. I think that's really key. But 72%, I've ran some similar things and I've never gotten into 72%. So obviously, you know more than me. So the highest I've gotten something to in a model is like 64. So that's awesome. And maybe we'll talk more about that afterwards, how you did it. But that's really cool, though. Anything else from that? That's very fascinating. So obviously, the more guests you can accommodate, the more revenue. Was
mhm.
there anything else that kind of stood out that you feel like had somewhat of an impact or whatever?
Yeah. So we said number of guests is the biggest one. The second one was proximity to the beach. So
Mm,
longitude, the closer it was to the coast. Again, that makes sense, but that also points to how each market is different, right?
yeah,
Like you can't just like the location is going to change per market. If that made sense.
yeah.
And then lastly was, or at least the third one was houses performed better than apartments or shared rooms. And then the fourth one was having a pool or hot tub.
Great. So can you tell us? Here's another curveball. Sorry, I
Yeah.
feel like I've got them. I'm like, I'm just curious here.
Yeah.
This is great. Can you tell us, is there like a range, a revenue range, or what type of impact a pool or a hot tub had on revenue? I'm sure a lot of people want to know that.
It was definitely very significant. Again, there were, I don't even know, maybe 50 features I was looking at, and this
Okay,
was number 4. So very significant. To find out that number, I would have to
dive
reread
in
the
deeper.
certification
Okay, yeah, that's
a
fine.
while back. But
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no worries. Just curious. Okay, so that's really fascinating. And this was for what market or markets? Did it contain multiple markets or was it just single market?
This was Los Angeles County.
Los Angeles County. Okay.
Mhm.
So with that being said, what are your thoughts? Like, do you think the data can be applied to any market, or do you think it changes market to market?
Not at all. I think it definitely changes market to market. I will say probably the number of guests accommodated for is general universal. Um, but then, location to beach is not really relevant in a lot of things. So it's like location, maybe proximity to whatever, uh, you know.
I mean, if you think Smoky Mountains,
Yeah.
proximity to the national park, 10
Mhm.
million people a year go to the Smoky Mountains. And so if you're in
Exactly.
Gatlinburg, you might, might run the same model and
Mhm.
you can see like, oh, wow, like, because the Smoky Mountain, it's like right here. And then the other properties are, better performing properties would be in certain areas. But from my experience, I'll just add this, like, it does depend on the market. And obviously beach ones are straightforward, but certain markets like mountain markets, it could be just properties who are in better neighborhoods or who have views at the top of the mountains, and you'll see the best top
Yeah.
properties all around, which you can see in STR Insights, by the way. But you can see that around, and you can identify where are the best spots, kind of where properties are maximizing the revenue. You live in Louisville. Did I at
Yes.
least pronounce
Well,
that right? No, dang it, I'm not gonna. Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm half
I
joking.
struggle with that one. I'm just gonna say Louisville and own the wrong pronunciation of it, and we'll go from there. But there is. I'm pulling this out. It just popped in my head, but I just realized you're from that, or you live there at least. There is a strip in the. I assume it's the downtown area. I'm looking up the road right now, but it's like where the majority of all the top properties are in Louisville. So like it's what is this highway or road called? Do you know what I'm talking about? Bardstown Road. Bardstown Road.
Bardstown. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I mean, like I'm literally, and I apologize, people watching, I'm not sharing my screen, but I'm in STR Insights. I'm looking and I use the revenue percentiles to see where the top properties are. And the majority of them are just on that strip there. Why is that the case? What's the explanation there?
Definitely the attractions there. There's great nightlife and restaurants and all of that is over there.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I know we're diving deep into certain markets but let's talk more data because that's why you're here, not to talk about Louisville, but I just thought I'd bring it up while we were talking about location. It does vary.
I could add one interesting tidbit on that. So Derby is a huge attraction every year. It's already, I think, booked up. And that's happening in May. And that's in Churchill Downs, which is actually kind of like a low socioeconomic status. That's a hard word. A socioeconomic status area, but it has such a drive with Derby. So it's a little interesting.
Okay, that's cool. That's good to know. Let's talk general though. Let's get out of the specific markets and talk data. So it sounds like you're pretty good at this location thing, identifying. Let's talk the trends. What are you seeing in the data? Where should people invest or look into based on destination type?
Okay. I hope nobody hates me after this one. Kenny might get some nasty comments. I'm sorry in advance.
All right.
So I grouped by destination type. Again, this is the aggregation. So obviously some different markets, some different beach markets will perform differently. But so we have beach, mountain, river and lake, national and state parks, and then urban. So I grouped by those destination types and then got the average annual revenue.
And just to clarify, we're talking specifically in the US, correct? Not other countries, just those destination types in the US.
Correct.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, so overall, the worst performing in terms of just annual revenue, keep that caveat in mind because we're going to revisit that, but just in terms of annual revenue, the river and lake destination type performed the worst.
Okay.
That's coming in at number 5. And number 4, we have the national and state parks. Then, somewhat surprisingly, we see city at number 3. Mountain is the second best, and then beach is the best.
In terms of annual revenue, and this is average revenue for that particular
annual average revenue.
Okay. Here's a question. When you were looking at the data, another curveball, I apologize. When you see the market, if it's in multiple destination types, so Smoky Mountains, it's a good example. It just came right, it's mountains and it's national park. So where did it fall, or how did you group that or label that, or did it just kind of go together? Or, how did you handle that?
Sorry, grouping by different markets?
So some markets have multiple destination types. So like, for example, Gatlinburg is in the mountains and it's near national park. A lot of national park, some are in the mountains or even on the beach. There's a few that are also have that second destination type as well. How did you handle that?
Oh gosh.
I gave you a really hard curveball. Sorry, I told you I wouldn't do that.
I'm also oh God, do I pull up my code? That's probably clunky.
So I guess did you separate those at all in your thinking, or is it kind of just which one took priority, I guess, if you're looking at those?
There was groupings though. So river and lake was one grouping.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So we're breaking them down just so everybody's clear. So we're breaking them down by the different destination types. And it sounds like even if it fits different destination types, like there are some markets that could technically be classified as mountain and beach. So they got labeled with mountain and they also got labeled with beach. So keep that in mind as you're like, and I'm speaking to the people here, not you, Caroline, but like people listening, but keep that in mind as you're like listening to this data and understanding it. Somebody asked, is this the average revenue for the entire market or is it per bedroom count?
It's per bedroom count. And that actually is perfect. Thank you, whoever asked that, because so those 5 I listed in order, I just looked through and that's like the general trends, but there are some like small, I'll say, discrepancies. Let me find one. So as I said, the beaches are generally the best performing, but for 1 bedrooms, the mountains actually get higher annual revenue.
And
1 bedroom.
That's interesting. Putting you on the spot here. Why, like, and this is your opinion at this point. I believe this would be your opinion, but why do you think that's the case? That the 1 bedrooms on mountains would perform better? I have a suspicion, but I want to let you tackle that one.
Yeah, I think it's probably because to go to the beach is more maybe family oriented, and whereas like there could be like sole travelers going to the mountains.
I 100% agree. I think that also, so my belief is that when you think of a 1 bedroom, there's no 1 bedroom, or I guess there could be, but there's not like 1 bedroom cottages on the beach.
Yeah, exactly.
And condos don't make as much as a like 1 bedroom, even tiny home. If we look at the data, if we look at like property types and grouping those, the average tiny home in the US makes like 62,000. So tiny homes are more prevalent in, different types of markets, but definitely not beach markets, but more mountain markets. And so it makes sense to me that, hey, there's probably larger structures if we look at the pure square footage of these properties. Now, we don't have that kind of information offhand, so we can't share that with everybody to fully support that theory, because that's what it is. But I assume that's why the mountain average for 1 bed count is doing better than the beach one. So, and then also what you said too, families are going to beaches most likely than just, and then romantic getaway. I think somebody put that in the comments. Romantic getaway is going to be mountains. So I really like that. So anyway, go ahead, continue on.
Yeah. And then similarly, I also found that for 6 bedrooms, the national and state parks are just crushing it. Average of $107,000 annual revenue. And they're above the urban 6 bedrooms, which are 103,000. So, and I think it's a similar thing of like knowing your avatar, knowing your traveler. You see people book out huge cabins in national and state parks, whereas in a city, I don't know if they need 6 bedrooms necessarily, maybe.
So yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Do you have any recommendations in terms of like, because people don't have access to this kind of data or this information until today, in terms of like understanding this. So I love what you said about understanding your avatar. So how do people do that now, having this information? How do they like study like, oh wow, the 6 bedroom in national parks does well? Like, how do they go and they take that and figure out their avatar?
For one, I think is it called the friendly competitor method? Is that right?
And in that, we get what you're saying. So looking at the competitors,
look at your competitors, Airbnbs, maybe the reviews there. Who are the people visiting? What are they going for?
Okay, cool. Sweet. So let's keep moving on with the data. What else did you find?
Okay. And then also on that like bedroom count part, I did notice too, this was kind of interesting, that let me try to say this very clearly. The disparity increases with bedroom count. So for cities versus beaches, for example, the beaches for a 1 bedroom, beaches performed about $8,000 better annually. But then when we look at for a 6-bedroom, beaches were performing about $44,000 better.
Okay.
We do see that overall, like,
so like what we call that, like marginal returns to scale or something like that, or like basically, yeah. So like basically like it's never linear. I think that's what's really important here is when you're looking at a market and you're looking at a breakdown of the bedroom counts, it's never linear. Like the 1 bedroom's not going to do 20, the 2 bedroom's not going to do 30, and then 40, like up like that. It'll be like 20, 35, 45, and then might jump up to 70 for like the 3 or the 4 bedroom. And so you have to like, that's the beautiful part about looking at the data and finding the opportunities for everybody listening is not only understanding, oh, is this a good market to invest in, but where in this market and what type of bedroom count should I be targeting? Because demand is going to vary, guest sizes will vary, and demand varies, and the revenue will show that. And the real estate prices never reflect purely the revenue. I was looking at, it was, I don't know where the heck it was it North Georgia? I think it was North Georgia. And I was looking at like properties, so like 2 bedrooms and then 3 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms. And, they were like 2 bedrooms were priced at, we'll say 500,000, 3 bedrooms, 600,000, 4 bedrooms, 700,000. It was like incremental on average, like the median listing prices. But then the average revenue for those bed counts wasn't incremental. It was like, 60,000 and 70. And then the 4 beds were making 100,000, which is like this big jump. And so obviously the ROI difference, the gross ROI, which we can see in STR Insights, varies, and you can use that to help you know, oh, is this a good opportunity in this market? Wow, some people are asking, there's a good one. John wants to know all 50 factors that you used in your report to if you want to just list them out for us right now, Caroline.
I will do a little plug. So I actually talked about that thesis in a lot of depth on No Vacancy, the podcast. The episode is called Talk Nerdy to Me. So, there you go. I don't list out the 50 factors, but I do go into a lot of more depth into that thesis. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's funny. Honestly, like the data too that we're kind of looking at in the data set. So everybody knows I don't know, everybody knows, but people listening, STR Insights is creating data sets that you can get access to soon that have all the different amenities that you can think of. And Caroline, are there more than 50 amenities?
Oh my God, yes.
Tell us what happened recently when you were working on that. What did you have to do? What did you have to take and then turn it into?
Yeah, so I've been working with Kenny, and there are so many, like hosts will say, I don't even know, what do they say? Pantene moisturizing, renewing, the best body wash and shampoo in the world. And you're like, okay, you have to take all of that and extract just shampoo.
There's like 84,000, right?
Yes. And people love to fluff their stuff.
Oh yeah, and there's different ones in Airbnb. Just so you guys know, we pulled every single amenity from every listing in Airbnb and like just said, okay, here's what they are, and then Caroline had to go through and clean it. She didn't do it manually, in case you were wondering. Like she used fancy words like machine learning and AI to figure that out. But anyway, so there's a lot of factors. And even beyond amenities, you take reviews and ratings and accommodates and bed count and bathroom count as well. I mean, all those things, and location, latitude, longitude coordinates, they all can impact revenue. And so it's really fascinating. So we're working on a way to get that out to folks so you can do your own analysis. Brendan, I'm assuming, is under the account of Tom, is asked a question about Caroline, which I believe the answer is no, but I just want to ask he goes, did you look at like how amusement park or theme parks markets compared to other ones?
Amusement areas like, no, not currently, but I do think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I will probably say they were less than the other market types, just because a lot of times in amusement park areas, like we'll take Disney, Orlando, Kissimmee, Davenport, there's so many rentals and the bed count is a lot smaller in terms of like the average across the market. And so and the revenues are a little bit less. You'll notice Disney investing in Disney is a lot more affordable, like in Kissimmee or Orlando area is a lot more affordable than investing in like a Destin or, Miami Beach or, even I would say it's on borderline with Myrtle Beach, but less than Myrtle Beach, which is one of the cheaper beach markets in the country. So, I think that the revenue on average is just a little bit less in those amusement parks. It probably fall at either 5 or 6, to be honest, just off the top of my head. But I'm making some assumptions. So anyway, cool. Let's keep moving. Caroline, what else can you tell us?
Yes. So, I mentioned like beach markets are performing very well, but before you all run and get a beach property, I was actually just talking to Tony Bower. So shout out to her, great real estate agent.
Well, she's also a real estate investor as well, so that's okay. I'm sure she'll take it.
And in Kentucky. Anyway, and she was telling me that she only recommends that seasoned investors go for beach markets or the lake and river markets, just because they are so seasonal. So, you might start in July and get a really good revenue, but you have to make sure that can carry you through. Whereas a seasoned investor might have more cash and be willing to like endure I'll say hard winters.
Yeah, the hard winters. That's very true. The number one mistake I made last year was I purchased my other property in a very seasonal market, and the timing of the launch. So I said, you know what, I'm going to furnish this myself. Yep, I'm going to do this myself, and I'm going to launch the sucker when I get it done on my own. I'm not going to hire anyone. I don't want to waste the money to do that. It took me almost a month and a half to get it going, and I lost about $10,000 of revenue I could have made based on what I'm seeing this year for that month. And so, I mean, that's $10,000. Sure, I could have paid $2,000 to have people help me and speed that up, but that's an $8,000 delta in difference that I really could have made by just paying someone to help and catch that additional month of the high season. So timing is really key. And I like what you said. I mean, we're towards the middle of March. And if you're looking at a beach market right now, I mean, this is the start of the kind of the peak season. You got spring break. People are booked up in those areas. And then the summer season, then it just kind of falls off in September, October when people go back to school. Families, like you mentioned, go back to school. And so really what we want to do is, you're right, absolutely right. I think timing is key there. Cool. So keep going. What's the data say on the occupancy for beach markets on average, or by bedroom count, whichever you have?
Yeah, both.
Okay. All right. She's got it all. She's got it all like sectioned out. I love it.
Yeah. So again, it's pretty similar to what I mentioned previously. However, the beach market it has the best annual revenue, but now we see that urban areas have the best occupancy overall, roughly. Again, it's changing per bedroom count, but beaches, because of that seasonality, they can be less occupied, but when they are occupied, they can get more per night.
Yeah. And I would love to see, I'm not going to, this one would 100% put you on the spot. I already know the answer, but I would love to compare the occupancy of urban markets over time, especially in the last 3 years, to see. I assume it's definitely increased, however, with the increase in market saturation, especially in some of these urban markets, how has that impacted occupancy, compared to even during COVID? I mean, during COVID, all the hosts shut down, and after a couple months there was nobody, and things were starting to slightly open, and I was booked all the time. So in an urban market. So anyway, that would be kind of fun to look at too down the road. But anyway,
I did look at saturation.
Oh,
I always hear that. Yeah. And look, I want to buy a property in Miami, so I need to worry about saturation. But I actually found that annual revenue increases with each binning of the more saturated the market, the higher the annual revenue. It's absolutely linear.
Okay. Well, so I guess, can you explain why that's the case?
I mean, I think that there is, as we mentioned earlier, like Bardstown Road or, Disneyland, whatever. If you're near an attraction, you're going to get tourists and people visiting, and those saturated markets tend to have, a a lot of attractions over there. They're already like, how do I say this? Like the proof is in the pudding. Like other people are doing it and getting well.
What do you define as a saturated market?
So I was looking at the number of active listings per zip code. So I've been that like 1 to 200 active listings. That was the very small one. 200 to 500, 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 1,500, and then over 1,500.
Okay, gotcha. And then you're saying that a certain count would be considered saturation listing count? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Cool. All right, let's jump back out of that one. We can come back to that one in a second.
Actually, could I add one thing though?
Yeah, go ahead.
So again, these are averages, and I think maybe one thing I was, thinking about, you let me know your insights, Kenny, but I was thinking too, with those saturated markets, maybe there's more of a market for luxury listings to come in. Mm-hmm. And they're like, moving the average up, right? Yeah. Whereas maybe in the smaller markets, there's less of those really high-end luxury properties.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So just so everyone, we're getting a lot of questions in the comments about saturation, like what is it the same as supply, and what metric is used to determine saturation point. So to determine it in your market, let's be a little more specific here, so Caroline did a lot of research for us in terms of market level in certain markets, and destination types, but saturation does come down to a market level, and it can also come down to a bed count level as well. So for example, if I take, I'm going to cherry pick, I won't use the first example came to mind of a market I'm actually looking to invest in, and I don't want to announce that online, but we'll say beach markets, for example. There are a lot of beach markets, so I'll pick Destin or Miramar Beach or 30A. There's a lot of condos. There's a lot of 2-3 bed condos even too, and the houses. But however, when you start getting into higher bed counts, the revenue and the demand is still there, but the supply is a lot less. So to determine true market saturation, the metric that we look at is revenue per active listing. It's called RevPAR. And we want to compare that year over year. So we want to look at last year's RevPAR. So how many total active listings there were, the total revenue of all active listings divided by the total count of active listings. That gives me RevPAR for last year. And then we look at it what it is this year. So the total revenue of this year divided by the total count of active listings in that market gives us a final. And then if it's lower than the last year, the RevPAR is lower than last year, then there's saturation. If it's higher, then that means there's no saturation and demand has increased, because supply increases, but demand can increase as well. So that's on a market level. But then you need to dive deeper too. I think Andrew asked this question. You need to dive deeper and look at it at a bed count level as well. And what you'll find, especially in like beach markets, is that the ones to maybe 4 bedrooms could be saturated, meaning that their total revenue compared to how many listings entered the market in the last year is a lot less compared year over year than maybe the total revenue of the number of listings entered into the market for higher bed counts. So it's really important to just say, don't just blatantly say, this market is completely saturated and you shouldn't get into it, because it varies on a bed count. We do not purchase market averages. We purchase properties in those markets. So understanding that is really key to just, understanding, is this a good market to go into or not? So anyway, do you have any thoughts to add to that, Caroline?
No, I fully agree. And someone mentioned higher revenue, but no ROI. Again, yes. Maybe not no ROI, but you do have to look at that as well.
It depends. It depends on ROI. Cash on cash, like cash flow, like those can vary and are different from each other. NOI, cap rate, like what are you really looking for? And how do you define like no ROI? Anyway, that can get into the weeds. So I want to press on. And I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes here. I know someone's asking about EV chargers, and I promise we're going to do a call in 2 weeks on amenity data. So stay tuned for that in 2 weeks. Look out for that information on that. But we're here to talk about occupancy rates. So can you just give us the rundown, the run through of the occupancy rates on average for the different destination types, Caroline?
Yes. So by different destination types.
However you want to give it.
Okay. So again, average occupancy was around 60 to 70%, just roughly. And maybe at first it kind of seems counterintuitive, but unsurprisingly, as bedroom count increases, occupancy decreases, right? Your 6-bedroom is getting booked less frequently, even though it's likely making more revenue.
And this is for all markets, all destination types? Like what's this for?
Yes.
So
yes.
and kind of going back to this, you kind of addressed it earlier, but if I'm a new investor and I'm wanting to be so first off, there's no such thing as a 4-season market, right? Like, just to be clear, like all markets have seasonality. But if I'm a new investor and I'm looking to be in a market that's less seasonal, which destination type should I probably be targeting? What type of market?
Urban, probably.
Urban.
And someone mentioned mountains are very seasonal. Yes, of course. I would say they can have obviously a high winter and then a high summer. Whereas, beaches might just have a really high summer and less winter. So, but anyway, yes, to your question, I would say urban is the most evergreen.
Yeah, I love that. Like, kind of overall average, we see less variance in that data for seasonality. I will say though, it depends on the mountain market too. Like,
yes.
if you go to the Smokies, that's a 3-season market. They've got a ski resort there. They do stuff in the wintertime, and then the summertime's obviously like the like the really, really peak time. But it's not just 2 seasons there. And there's some beach markets that are definitely not just 2 seasons, or like a spring, early fall, kind of late spring, like that catch that little part of the year. A lot of beach markets are, but there are some beach markets that aren't as seasonal as others. So it does vary, depending on the market. And I think that's really important. I know, Caroline, you want to give the disclaimer there, I guess. I
was kind of going to slightly pivot to just something that was super interesting to me, which was that mountains are like, mainly good for winter. I'm just going to agree with that. But for national and state parks, like Yosemite, for example, they're technically open 365 days of the year. However, a lot of the roads are closed in the winter. So people can't get there. So that is something to look at in those national and state parks. Is there snow plowing of those roads? Is there easy access? There also might be limits on commercial interests, like building, I don't know, a ski resort or a hotel or some other attractions. So it might be more difficult than in, I don't know, Big Bear Mountain, where there are ski resorts and they plow and everything. Well, mostly, other than this past winter, which was crazy. But anyway. Gotcha.
No, it's really interesting. So national park markets, how are those overall in terms of occupancy?
Those were pretty low. So River and Lake was the lowest occupancy, and national and state parks were low as well. But this one has a lot more nuance. So basically, for the annual revenue, I could pretty easily just look at every single number, and it was kind of consistent in general across bedroom count. For occupancy, I mean, I could spend like an hour listing like this one has higher on this bedroom count compared to this. It got a lot more nuanced, so it's hard for me to give that overall ranking.
Okay.
But in general, River and Lake and national and state parks had the lowest occupancy.
All right, sweet. What else you got for us? This is all interesting.
Yeah, one interesting thing was regulations.
Ooh.
So again, a big topic of discussion, should I go into a regulated market? We grouped
legally, right? Just to legal. Should you go into a regulated market legally, right? Not illegally. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. To be clear, we're not advocating for anyone to go into a regulated market illegally, but to go into one legally and jump through the hoops to be legal. So anyway, go ahead, Caroline.
Thank you. Legalese. Okay. So we grouped by heavy regulation amount, moderate, and little to none.
Okay.
And the moderate had the highest annual revenue.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. So when you say moderate, and if you need me to define it, that's okay. But do you know what the difference is between, can you explain the differences between little to none, moderate, heavy, restricted?
I feel like you have this answer ready, so why don't we hand it off to you?
All right. I wasn't sure. So I do want to explain it to everybody. So there's there's four, right? There's four on the sheet that you looked at. I'm just looking at it right now. Okay. So yeah. So there's heavy, moderate, restricted, little to none, and then unknown. So, well, I guess there's five if I can count right. So the fifth one, unknown, means that there's just no regulation in that market at all. They don't have any plans. There's nothing going on. Little to none means that there might be like you need to register, but there's no type of like restrictions in terms of the number of short-term rentals or zoning or anything else. Like, a market comes to mind. A lot of markets like in Wyoming, it's pretty open except Jackson Hole or Jackson area. But very open, very little regulation. There's not a lot of markets that actually fit in that. Most of them fit in the moderate category. So when we say moderate, that means like you've got to register, you've got to get a license, you've got to do some sort of something with the city and there are some sort of like rules like they have to have an inspection or you have to have a certain number of guests. I mean, there's a lot of different things. Heavy is also very popular as well. And you're starting to see a lot of markets move to a heavier regulation type. Heavy is basically like there's only a certain number of listings that can be in a market, or there's a cap, which is the same thing as what I just said. Zoning is a big one too. Only certain zoned areas can have short-term rentals. And then also there could be like you need to have an on-site, a person that lives within an hour's drive or 30 minutes or 10 miles. There's so many different types, but there's more hoops and there's more restrictions to go through. And so heavy is also like getting popular in most areas. Most urban markets would be considered heavy, depending on the rules and where they are. And then restricted is like you cannot actually like have a short-term rental and not live there. So non-owner occupied short-term rentals are not allowed. So think Boston is a good example. You have to live on site. Some of Nashville, I know Nashville you can still get in. I actually consider that market heavy and others would say it's restricted. It truly is heavy because you can get into that market, but you have to be in certain areas. But anywhere where it's like completely illegal to have a short-term rental is considered restricted. So anyway, that's your basic definitions. So tell us more about that data though.
Yeah, so moderate I found to be had the highest annual revenue, which is kind of interesting, but I think makes sense because like, in Las Vegas, for example, heavy regulations, if there's an Airbnb, you're not allowed to get another Airbnb within a half-mile radius, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So it makes sense. They're heavily regulated, but then in those moderate markets, it's probably like you're still saturated enough. There's still enough of city there, attractions, but you can still operate well.
Okay, cool. Anything else with that?
I did want to mention, Jake was saying that the mountains can be busy in summer as well. Yes, I completely agree. Don't know if I said that, but I meant to. And if you're buying a mountain property, it's great to think about if there could be an attraction during the summer as well. Is there a lake people can fish at, or, hiking, or, oh my God, I forget what people do in the summer right now, but, people do things in the summer. So any attraction like that.
Cool. Sweet. All right. Well, I think we've hit that minute mark. So guys, if you have any questions, any kind of final questions, there was one question asked, what beach markets have the lowest prices for revenue? First thing you should do is go to STR Insights and check it out because you can answer the question yourself. But if you're lazy like me, I can just shoot it off for you. So Myrtle Beach, Gulfport, Mississippi, and Texas coast are the cheapest beach markets in the United States. So just fun fact for you guys that have the lowest prices for the revenue. So higher, I guess you're asking about ROI. There are some markets in Florida that are pretty decent. Orange Beach is technically Alabama, but that one's pretty high up there. Melbourne Beach in Florida too. So that have a higher ROI. It is pricier though. So keep that in mind. Florida markets, beach markets are pricier than the ones listed before. Great. So do we consider ROI or property taxes in our ROI calculations? No, that's very important. I mean, property taxes will vary. I think that the one big mistake that a lot of investors make, I see it time and time again, is they don't calculate in the reassessment of purchasing a particular property. So you basically, if you buy a house from an owner who's owned it for 20 years or more, there's going to be a massive reassessment on that property most likely, and you're going to get hit hard. Now, I know certain states, there's certain, there's reassessments, regulation stuff, but I've seen it all over the place. So, you might be good in some states, but most people make that mistake, and they're not looking at the reassessment of the property taxes, which can massively eat into your cash flow. So, but yeah, our calculations never take into account property taxes. So. Cool.
Yeah. And if I could just quickly jump back to that EV charger question. So I did find that EV chargers do, have a positive impact on nightly rate. However, they're very rare. So it was a little hard to tease that out. But that's opportunity for you if you are in.
It's true. And what I tell people is like you said, look at your guest avatar. Do they drive Teslas or electric vehicles? And if they do, get an EV charger. It's $1,200 for like the nicer one. So don't pay more than that, but it does have a decent ROI. So anyway, go ahead, Caroline.
Yeah, I mean, just on that point, we have some guests come up to Big Bear and they will drive Teslas, and then it dies and they can't drive back down the mountain. I shouldn't be laughing, but they need an EV charger. So
that is kind of funny, but yes, you need. And I was talking to Bill Faith. He's invested in Banner Elk, which is a luxury ski resort in North Carolina, the high country. And I asked him, I said, Bill, how many EV chargers are in Banner Elk? And he said there are a grand total of 2. So his wife has a Tesla. She can't drive her Tesla to Banner Elk because there's nowhere to charge it. It just doesn't make sense. So they're going to put one in their property. And I think that's really key, especially in a lot of these drive-in destinations. So it's something to consider. Somebody asked a question. I can probably answer it, but it's up to you, Caroline. What's the difference between ROI and cash flow?
Oh, is this for me?
If you want to answer it, okay. Yeah, so there's ROI could be gross ROI, which is just your total gross revenue. So take the gross revenue divided by the purchase price of the property. That would be a gross ROI or return on investment. Cash flow is the net profit you get at the end of the year. So how much money after all your expenses and your debt, so the mortgage, do you get at the end of the year? That's cash flow. So we start with gross ROI and then we break it down further. So we'll look at gross ROI, we'll look at cash on cash return, so how quickly I can get my money back that I put into the deal. And then we'll look at yearly cash flow. So how much money am I actually getting out of this property? That's really important to determine if it's worth your time to invest in that property or not. So that's a great question that I could spend about 30 minutes on, but I won't. So, okay, guys. So it looks like we're pretty much answered all the questions here. I'm sorry if we didn't get to one of yours. You can obviously reach out to myself. But Caroline, how do people, if they want to get in contact with you, if they want to follow you, what do they need to do? How do they do that?
Go to my Instagram. It's Caroline.Tomasik. Difficult last name, but I think you can do it. So.
At least for Kenny. Not an English major. I'll say that. Just give myself a little defense here. It's obviously the data. So anyway, well, Caroline, I appreciate you being on this call. I think this was very insightful. Guys, if you liked this video, if you or at least thought that what we talked about was helpful in any way, give us a like or a thumbs up or whatever that is. A comment would be great. Hey, good job, guys. Thanks for giving the thank you. Let us know. We love to get the feedback, just to know if we're, helpful or maybe we need to work on that. So happy to improve. But anyway, thanks, Caroline, and thanks everybody for listening. And we'll see you next time.